Yeah. I was like, yo, how you and your wife making this money? It's like, oh, from rentals.
Hopefully after this year,
He said
and then I'm
mainly they make their money off
not
of renting lenses.
because it's. I mean, all the materials
That's
for
like
the
the
shot
actual best thing to buy
however you want it to
The
if you
lens.
want to rent is
proceed,
lenses.
depending on kind of how it comes together. But I've
Because some lenses
have
are
the
like
budget for it in this year.
35,000, 40,000, 50,000. So if
So
you
that's what I have to figure out.
rent them out to studios and things
So
like
I'm going to
that,
email
they
the
always need
information from
lenses,
the
right?
HBO schedule,
Right.
So
so I
you're
got to do
always
that,
renting things out when you're not using them.
trying
So
to get back to them.
they just be killing.
Different.
Now. Testing. Eric.
I got a minor watch of
All
residual.
right. Welcome, everybody. Arkansas PBS is honored to co-host this event with the Brent Renaud Foundation. And, we're here today to remember Brent and also to celebrate his legacy of storytelling. Many of you in this room know the work of Craig and Brent through the years. They formed a Peabody, duPont, IDA, and Edward R. Murrow Award-winning documentary team. And for decades, they put human face to stories around the globe. Working together and independently, Craig and Brent always took the time to tell the stories that nobody else was telling. We also know that they founded the Little Rock Film Festival, and we've been so grateful for that. They founded it, managed it, fought for it. It brought a lot of film culture to Arkansas. And along the journey, the brothers worked with a lot of talented filmmakers. And we have several of them here with us today. We have Juan Arredondo, Aman Abbasi, and Jamal Hodge. And if I were going to reel off all of their resumes, I'd be standing up here for way too long. And so we'd take time away from what we really came for, is for them to tell their stories. But Juan is a New York-based award-winning Colombian-American photographer and documentarian. He's chronicled human rights violations and conflicts from South and Central America. He's a regular contributor to the New York Times, to National Geographic, and he met the Renaud brothers when he and Brent were both Nieman Fellows at Harvard University. Aman Abbasi is here from Los Angeles, and Aman has worked many times with the brothers over the years. His first feature, Davion, premiered at Sundance and was nominated for 2 Independent Spirit Awards. He's currently making a film called Yasmin's Element, and very shortly maybe working again with Arkansas PBS on a project about Afghan refugees in Arkansas. We just found out we got a grant just a couple of days ago to do that. I would like to point out that on his Instagram it reads, "From the East, born in the North, raised in the South, living in the West." So that's Aman. Jamal Hodge is a multi-award-winning filmmaker and writer from Queens, New York City, who's won over 80 awards with screenings at festivals, Tribeca, Sundance, the Cannes Short Film Corner. He's directed pilots for Netflix, series for Discovery, and segments for PBS, and he's also an active member of the Horror Writers Association. Love that. Craig is currently working with Arkansas PBS on a multi-part documentary series called Southern Storytellers that will air nationally on PBS next summer, and it features some of the most renowned creators from the world of literature, poetry, popular music, television, and film. And Jamal and Juan are also part of Southern Storytellers, which is great. Craig is developing a feature documentary with HBO about his brother Brent. So I will now turn it over to Craig.
Hello. So I'm not a fan of standing up here and talking nonstop. So I would like to kind of get just a little bit of an understanding, especially from students, of what your interests are, because we have such a range of experience on the stage. And so I'm kind of curious if the main focus is documentaries, if it's unknown, if it's scripted, if it's print, photography, we have all that covered. So I'm just kind of, I think we do have mics, but I'm curious from the students here if you'd raise your hands and then they can bring a mic to you so we have a sense of what everybody's interests are.
Hello. Oh, okay. Hi.
Hey.
I'm Cooper, and I go to Conway High School, right down the street. And what am I interested in? That's a great question. I don't know. I take whatever's kind of thrown in my lap. I do a lot of independent screenwriting. I finished a short film a couple months ago, and I'm in the very early stages of working on a documentary. I'm still like deciding if I even want to do it. I have a main focus on like fictional storytelling in film and stuff, but I don't know, documentaries are a really important medium that I would love to be a part of and love to work on. But I don't know, with it being such like a real life kind of thing, it gives me a little bit of anxiety. So
I'm also curious, as you guys tell us what you're interested in, if what you in your mind feel like is a barrier for you, or something that you haven't quite figured out in terms of what's your next steps, because I think that's something that we could talk about a lot too. Is, you know, are you planning on staying here, going to a larger city or market? You know, I'm curious to hear about that from everybody.
Well, okay, there we go. I can go ahead and answer that part of the question if, okay.
Yes, please.
That's kind of what I've spent the last couple, like maybe 10 years figuring out. I knew when I was 8 I wanted to make movies, but it took me a while to kind of decide on college. I think I plan on going here to UCA. But after that, I don't know. I know I want to spend a good portion of like my 3rd and 4th year here kind of working on a film, maybe over the summers of those 2 years, but I don't know, because I don't know, I guess I'm from like lower middle class kind of family, and money for film is a big kind of barrier for me, and asking for help is also really difficult. But so asking for help and getting funding for any project ever.
I mean, so yeah, I just thought about it. Not a single one of us went to film school. Yeah. And that's not to say bad things about film school, but
It's kind of a hustle. I don't think you need more than like 6 months of it. You know, it's better just once you get the foundation, because film is a collaborative venture, and it's something that you have to learn by doing a lot of it. You know, you can't just be in film theory, and then, you know, a lot of times people are in film theory too long, and then they come out and they get so committed to this to these processes and these structures that are not applicable for the resources they have, or to the environment, or to the story that they're trying to tell, who they are as an artist. So I feel like it's much more valuable to find that core team of people who are like-minded and to grow and build with them. Like, so much of our profession is based around intimacy and having a strong perspective about the story you're trying to tell. And you also got to be open to discovery. If you're gonna build this foundation and this school foundation that they give you, I'm not saying that it's completely useless, but I'm just saying that it's more important that you're growing with other artists, like-minded artists, while discovering who you are and what your voice is. So that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, I agree with Jamal. I'm not sure if you all can hear me, but with or without film school, I still think the idea of exactly what Jamal is saying is finding your group of collaborators, much like a band. And I don't think experience is as much of a barrier as much as it is chemistry, you know, as you're figuring things out and finding those individuals that you trust. And in terms of the two things you're talking about, funding and asking for help, I think they kind of go hand in hand. They definitely are barriers, and those are tough. But I have found that more people are similar to you than you'd realize, because everyone is going to want to try to take a crack at making a movie or something of that nature. And so it's actually less of asking for help, and it's much more like building a community, because there's going to be so many people that you didn't realize have the shared vision as you, or you have the shared vision of someone else. So, you know, take that leap of faith, talk about your ideas pretty openly, and slowly but surely you'll see the people who keep on kind of gravitating back to you, or you're gravitating towards. And then in terms of funding, yeah, that is a realistic barrier. Thankfully, in our generation, it's way less than it used to be.
That's right.
because I mean I don't want to say as small as an iPhone, but there are ways you honestly could get started of just learning your own craft by having a camera and an edit and just playing around with it, you know.
Can I just add something to that? But you saying that you're afraid to ask for help. This is just a philosophy or perspective that's helped me. Is that everybody needs help, no matter how accomplished you think a person is or anything like that. Everybody wants to grow. Everything wants to grow and get bigger, right? It wants to achieve more. So everybody needs help. So like a lot of times you can get help by helping somebody else, or providing something for somebody else, or just seeing what other people need as well before you ask for what you need. You know what I mean? If you don't want to feel like it's charity, find out what they need. Yeah. You know, and then try to fill that role the best you can, or connect them to somebody who can, and then ask for what you need. But everybody needs help. We're all here to help each other, right? On some level, right? So don't ever feel ashamed about that. I mean, people who are multi-millionaires be begging for cash and they call it fundraising. So the richest people will be out there begging for cash. So yeah, don't worry about that.
Someone else want to take the mic? I could talk for hours.
Hi, I'm Emily Jefferson. I love print writing, feature stories. I think a barrier for me personally is just knowing where to start, like where to begin.
Yeah, you talk.
So, I mean, for me, it was, I'm always interested, it has to be something that I'm interested, that I'm drawn to. So the stories have to be something that I really want to dive into. Yes, you do take some work that maybe you're not, you know, your heart is not into it, but I tend to work long form. So most of my, and maybe I'm a bit different than these guys is because I've been crossing from photography and print media into film. And that's not to say that you should limit yourself only to one medium. I think you guys are what we are, but your generation is privileged because you can play with all these formats. You have podcasts, you have video, you got stills, you got print. So I think it's just a playground, and for me, it's the story. If I'm really interested in the story, that's where I begin. And you begin by asking questions. I think you have to be curious, and I think for me, that's the key. Ask questions. Why do you want to know about this? And then just dive into it. And people will perceive that. People will see that you're genuine, that you're interested in their lives and in their story. I always think of not as subjects but collaborators, and then you see that collaboration happening, and that's when your story. And just let the story take you wherever it goes. Depending on what client you're working for, you might have to stick to an editorial line, but for the most part, when I do my long-term projects, personal projects, they're self-financed. You start writing grants, you start sending it different places to see where it gets published, and that's how you get the ball rolling. And eventually, when you get these collaborations and friends, and you have a group of core people that you trust, they'll help you shape it. You know, I always believe in that getting that feedback from people and say, well, I think this is missing, because you get tunnel vision sometimes with those stories, but to go back to where to begin is what is your interest? What story right now you're interested in telling? Whether that's migration, maybe something in your neighborhood. I for once idealized this image of wanting to be a foreign correspondent, because I thought, everything outside was more interested. And then I turned to my country and I saw that there was a potential there. There's so many stories. So I did look first there.
Can you briefly tell what you were doing when you decided to become a photographer?
Okay, yeah.
How old you
were? So before getting into any of this madness, I was a chemist. So I went to school for chemistry, graduate school for chemistry, and then when I was a scientist, so I used to work for Merck Pharmaceuticals, developing drugs, medications, and that wasn't very fulfilling. So photography started as a hobby. I guess as everybody, started taking pictures of portraits of people, water lilies, man, I don't know, anything, sunsets, sunrises, and then someone gave me a couple of books of very well-known documentary photographers, and that I was like, oh, I like that. Let me see how I can do it. I took some classes, and luckily, my first job was for the Times as a freelancer, and so I began working in New Jersey and in New York, covering everything. And for me, that was the best school I could have, because I had to photograph real estate, sports, politics, anything, restaurants, and so you had to be quick, you had to think fast. And then after a while, I said, okay, I want to go abroad, because I think there's stories of my country that I don't see in print. So this goes back to your question of like what to do. Don't feel pressured that you have to. Don't feel pressure. I mean, don't feel bad, or don't feel pressured of pivoting and changing careers. I mean, I know it sometimes is frightening. For me, it was. I didn't know if I should do it. I already invested so many years in chemistry, and I had a very good job. I was living in New York, and and a lot of people discouraged me. Don't do it. Why? You're crazy. You're not. But it made me happy. It is who I am. I can't see myself doing something different. So storytelling, documentary, all that came later in my life. So don't be afraid. If this is not your path and you find something else, then just follow that.
Yeah, and I think you have to, and I've heard Jamal talk about this a lot. It's really only yourself that says you are this, right? I'm a writer, I'm a filmmaker, and I think the quicker you get to where you start identifying yourself with that's where you start, and when Brent and I started at DCTV, what was great is, Downtown Community Television Center in New York is a community TV center. John and Keiko started it as a way to give inexpensive access to film equipment to empower the community in Chinatown. And so when we first came to DCTV as interns, we would see John Alpert, getting on the elevator with his dogs and going up to the top floor to edit. And, we were just like, man, if we can work with him someday. But when we had been there long enough and started approaching him, his whole thing was like, you've got to prove yourself and just get a camera and start your own documentary. Doesn't matter what it is. And so we did that, and you just learn from doing it. And that's how you're going to get better, and you're going to find good mentors and good people if you put yourself out there. But it's really, I think it's such a mental barrier that you can put up yourself, and there's not a single one of us that aren't constantly doubting our work, how we're going to get funding for the next project. That doesn't go away, unfortunately. So that's just something you have to get comfortable with, is that you're always going to be scrapping for money, for funds, doubting yourself. There's not a single edit in the beginning I don't sit down and have those sweats of like, this is going to be a complete failure and a disaster, and but you just keep working, and I think, talking about Brent, I mean, we all know that Brent was the hardest working person in the business, and I think the thing that gets easier as you get further in your career is you do realize that if I just don't stop working, you will be able to finish and have a good product, and it'll get, each film will get a little bit better. But so we can keep passing around. I'm curious to hear from other people. Okay, if you two could tell us what you're interested in.
So, my name is Tim. I'm from Joe T. Robinson, and somehow I knew that film was just something I wanted to go into. I don't know what about it or like what specific part, but I knew. And what I've always been interested is that people have always been able to put a little bit of themselves, their ideas into whatever project that may have been, or see to it that even though there's like a story being told, people who they're filming or what they're filming also tells a bit of itself in that story too.
And what's the the other question I had is, do you feel like there's a barrier for you, or what do you feel like's next for you?
So far, I feel like a barrier to me is like, even though I don't want to do it, it's just like, should I just jump into it and start there?
Hell yeah.
There is no other way than just jump in and start.
Yeah.
You got to start at one point. So
I think one of the things that really hold us back is this need to be perfect, because we're all told, like when we're young, that we're special and stuff like that. But I think you become special by doing the work over time. We're all unique, but you have to earn the right to be special, and you earn that by just doing the work and working hard over a long period of time, by self-discovery, self-mastery, and mastery of your craft. So the only way to become a master of anything is to begin, right? So and just by taking the first step, it's the most important step, the first step, but it doesn't have to be a perfect step. You can stumble, you can fall, you can get back up. You know what I mean? You have your youth, you have the whole world. You have, like Juan was saying, you have all these tools we didn't have. So you be excited about falling on your face. It's an opportunity to learn more about yourself, right? Wouldn't you rather have the reality of who you are as an artist than this idealized version? That idealized version is keeping you away from reality. And what makes you a great artist is not perfection, it's truth, it's authenticity, it's honesty. So being courageous, having the courage to be vulnerable enough to tell the truth, I think that's what makes you a great artist. So that begins with the first step. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, definitely.
Okay.
Just to add to that, I think there are more important things than perfection or even failure. It's just so much more about just the process, and that can just be like a long evolution. But I know that the idea of perfection certainly was this sort of limiting barrier, and failure as well. And I guess those aspects don't really go away at times. You just know how to stomach them a little bit better, and you realize, hey, this thing is definitely not perfect, and hey, I failed once again, you know? And so you kind of brush up against those two quite often. So you'll be like, okay, I'll try this again.
Yeah. It doesn't get easier, you just get tougher.
That's right.
You know?
Are there any other students that are ready to speak? I know the students, so I might just go.
Yeah, just people, yeah. Just people who want to talk.
Okay. I thought that was really interesting what you were saying about failure and like being okay with that, because as an artist, I feel like I do have that idea of like perfection, wanting to perfect everything. So how do you like deal with failing and maybe not having it be exactly the way that you want it to be? And like, how do you deal with that? Is basically what I'm saying.
I cry a lot. I hold the pillow close and, get a little cry out sometimes. But I'm not joking. Sometimes you just gotta cry it out. But honestly, everything, there's no permanent states. So just because you fail doesn't make you a failure. The difference is kind of like, the way I think of it is that as an artist, I think of myself as an apple tree. Right? An apple tree's only purpose is to make apples. Sometimes the apples are bitter, sometimes they're sweet. People come and take the apples. They might turn the apple into a pie or juice. The apple tree doesn't care what they turn it into or their opinions about what they want to use it for. It just keeps on making more apples. But if an apple tree was only purpose was to make one golden apple, once they ate the golden apple, they would just cut the tree down and turn it into a bench, right? So if you do make the perfect thing or the perfect film or the perfect anything, you're basically screwed after that, right? Because you can never really touch that again, right? Yeah. So it's like you're, as an artist, just keep on making apples. Some of them will be sour, some of them will be sweet, but you just keep on making apples. And if you think of it that way, and you understand, as long as you're maintaining your purpose of creating things and of discovery, you know, of storytelling, then, you know, even the sour apples you make, it can become something useful for somebody else over time, because there's no temporary state. Something might seem like a failure now, but 10 years from now, people might be like, oh, that's a masterpiece. That's like your greatest work. Or when you're gone, or you never know how that one thing that you created, if you didn't fail at that, stop thinking of these things as independent, like the things you make. They're all connected to this singular chain, I would say. So by you failing at that, it might make your next film greater, or your next film after that greater. So you got to look at it in a more holistic way. Does that help?
That was a great answer. Yeah. Thank you.
I think, you know, and this is what we want the foundation to be about, is building, you know, a community for people. Because I think as an artist, that's the most important thing, is you need to have other artists that you are connected to, regardless of where you're at in your career. I mean, when I talk to these guys, what do we talk about? We're always talking about what we're working on, you know, and you need those people that you trust, because, I mean, for example, before I go show a rough cut to HBO or PBS, I'm going to make sure I have a lot of other artists putting their eyes on it and giving me feedback and that sort of thing. And the perfection part of it does come in, you know, when it is time to show it to the HBO or PBS or for a grant. Yes, then you don't put something out that's not your best work or that you don't feel really proud about. But so build that community of people and artists that you trust and get their feedback as you're working through your project.
I have a question. It's from a completely different perspective. I'm a parent of an artist. Clark is mine. This is my daughter, Clark Preston. She's about to graduate from North Little Rock High. And I'm listening to you all say, if you feel like you're an artist and you want to do this, just go and do it. And I'm trying to figure out where she needs to go to college. So how do you balance that? You know, I'm listening to you say I was a chemist and I gave up my job to become a photographer. And I'm thinking, you know, as a mom, I would be, you what? Do you know how much it costs to send you to college? What? Yeah, and so I would like some advice for how you handle this, because you're saying reach out to the community. We don't have a community. She's an anomaly in our family. She's it. Right. She thinks differently. She likes different things. So she has to be fed differently. And it's hard to find that community that you're talking about for us. I mean, I don't know how to help her do that and not crush her dreams at the same time. Right. I want to be able to help her flourish.
I guess you want to say that?
Yeah, I feel like I really relate to being in that position of, you know, kind of aimlessly trying to find my community. And I was really lucky in high school to have met Brent and Craig, and I just kind of like stuck to them as much as they wanted to swat me away.
Borderline annoying, because we were filming at Central High, and every day he would come up, how do I be a filmmaker? You know, how do I be a filmmaker?
And yeah, I was probably like overeager because I didn't have any sense of community, and I felt so strongly of wanting to make movies, and I felt as though it was impossible. It was essentially dreaming of being an astronaut, and it's like, how do I do that? But I would encourage you to really kind of put your needs out there in your community, because you will be surprised, especially with a foundation like this. There are inroads to many, many places, whether it's working as an editor, whether it's working as a director, whatever it may be. So even though it may not be the most sort of sourced area for connections, I still think there's plenty, and those that are here, they're very quality, because it's very relatable to be in that position of not having those valuable inroads. So when you come from Arkansas, you want to make sure you really pave those wisely. As for college, unfortunately, I also left college, but that was But honestly, that was from a practical point of view, because I went to Hendrix next door, and it was just too expensive for me. And I also come from working class family, and I just knew they couldn't take out that amount of money, nor could I. So I left it, but I continued to work with them, and sort of just like use that as much of a disciplined, diligent career path as anything college would provide. I would still be as disciplined as I was working in those arts as I would be in a classroom. So it is a tougher path. There's no doubt.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't, I feel like my college experience was useful for a lot of reasons. I was an anthropology and Spanish majors, so that was the first time I left the country. I did a study abroad thinking I wanted to be an anthropologist, and then that's when it hit me that I wanted to do documentary film. So it did, so I don't want to discount going to college as putting you on a path, or it could put you in the right market in a bigger city, and so that's useful. And it does put her with the other people who are like her, so she's not the odd person out anymore. But I also took a year off. I know my mom thought I was never going to go to school after taking a year off, but that really helped me too, because I worked for that year and became more mature and a little more focused about what it was that I thought I wanted to do at the time, and then that put me on that path as well. So
I can relate what you said about, I'm spending all this money, and what is it that you want to do? Because my family, my friends, is, why are you leaving a career that you spend so much time and effort? But I kept telling them is I'm not happy, and I don't know. The answer is, do you want your daughter to be happy or not? And then just don't discourage her, and then just keep encouraging whatever is it that she wants to pursue. Not that people didn't do that. What I did, and I think something great as a foundation, like the Brent Renaud Foundation, is that you're going to have mentors. And I had many mentors in my career, and I'm always thankful to that somebody took the time to sit down and tell me, this is how you start this is how you do this. And I had many, and Brent was one of them. He was the one who gave me a shot to work with him in films with Craig, because I found that photography, even then after jumping from chemistry to photography, I grew a little frustrated from photography. I felt it wasn't telling the full story. And I wanted to learn other mediums. But then I got scared. And I went to school. So I went to school for film and journalism.
Oh, you did,
but I
sorry.
think when I realized when I went to school, I was like, but I know how to do this. I guess I just needed, sort of that confirmation that, okay, you were doing it right. But I think that's what you need, encouragement. And if you can continue to encourage her to do what she's doing. And in terms of community, I relate because I'm Hispanic, I'm Latino, Colombian. In the U.S., migration stories for me are very important because my family migrated, I migrated, and they have a special place in my heart. So there is something there in your community. Even if you feel like there's nothing around there, there's something that you can tap into. And that's the creative process, is that when you can have a mentor, a community that can help you shape those ideas. You don't have to be a silo, and you need other people to nurture you and to help you explore those ideas. So just keep at it. Don't give up. I know it's sometimes you see the road and it's just, oh my, I don't think I can do it. And the reason I also quit my profession is because I thought, at least I want to have that satisfaction to say, look, I tried. I gave it my best. It wasn't for me. But I don't know, it's been 12 years since I quit my chemistry job, and I can't imagine going back to that. I miss some things, and there's things of chemistry that permeate into my, I think, more of being very psychotic in a way, like very disciplined, and I have to document everything. I have to make sure everything's, so that discipline that I learned in the lab translated into photography. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but so there, you will learn from some other things, and they will come, and it will be a mixture. So.
Hi, my name is Corbin. I have a question for just filmmakers in general. What's some advice that you'd give filmmakers when they hit that low point in a project? Because, you know, you have that spark of inspiration or motivation that makes you start the project. But obviously, if you're making something that takes a prolonged amount of time, you're probably going to hit those moments where you don't have that inspiration or that motivation anymore. What is something that you guys think of that keeps that drive going or that motivation going to finish the project?
I definitely got this. So what I learned for me, and it's very subjective, is the addiction to inspiration is what kills your motivation as an artist a lot of times. Like sitting around waiting to be inspired, being addicted to be inspired, being addicted to that feeling, right? Because it's a feeling and you can get addicted to it. I think, yes, it's important to be inspired by something, but I don't think you should rely on that to start. I think, like I was saying earlier, everything just begins with the first step. If you believe in something, I think it's more about, do you believe in something that doesn't matter to you? Is it important? You know? If you feel like it's important, it doesn't necessarily have to start out with inspiration. You could just start. And then as you go through the process, there's going to be various stages. You know, inspiration is like a wave on the beach, right? It like ebbs and flows. So at different stages, you're going to be inspired. You're going to be, if it's documentary, you might be inspired by some of the subjects that you meet and what they say. And you get this thread and then it sparks something in you, right? But you shouldn't always expect that spark to just waiting around for that spark. You know what I mean? Yeah.
You have to just keep pushing through it. I mean, I get so paralyzed at the beginning of a project editing because, you know, we overshoot so much in verite filmmaking. So, I mean, we came back from Iraq with over 2,000 hours of footage and had to turn it into a 10-part series in like a few months. And I remember Brent and I literally having like a collective anxiety attack together, like just freaking out, you know, and it lasted like an afternoon. And then we were like, okay, we got to start somewhere. So we were just like, how can we structure this? So we just put some notes up on the board and we started with, okay, what was the best thing that you think you shot, you know, during our year in Iraq or whatever. So we came up, so it was a 10-part series. So we're like, let's come up with 10 of those things. Those are each going to be in one episode, and then we're going to just build around those scenes, and that's how we start. You know, and once we had that starting point, you know, then you calm down, and then you're like, okay, just get to work. So I just think you just have to keep pushing through it, because the longer you sit and waiting for that moment, like Jamal said, it's elusive, and so you do just have to just keep pushing through the work. But also just the importance of sharing with other artists. I mean, we're constantly doing that. You know, Aman just sent me the film that he just shot to watch, and I'm always sending stuff to these guys to watch and give feedback.
And I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I mean, one thing that defines you is obsession. You just become obsessed, and I think that's what keeps me going. Even though when you have those down days, or you just don't see the light, or you're just stuck, but you just become obsessed, and that's what keeps me going. I don't think, I mean, I can come up maybe with poetry like Jamal is coming, but to me it's just obsession. I'm obsessed with the work, I'm obsessed with the process. Yes, the end result's important, but I think I'm just, that's what I crave, that the process of just doing, and I love being in the field, and so obsession. So if you can be obsessed with what you're doing,
Thank you, guys.
I'll add to that. To the point of what you're saying, when it's a long form project and you hit those lows, I think creative fatigue is real for sure. And even it sort of outlasts obsession, at least for me, sort of kind of taps me where I feel like closer to burnout. And I think my two antidotes or my two remedies are, one, I kind of try to keep a very sort of disciplined schedule that feels like a vocation, less of an art. It's much more of a job. I'm here to just put in hours and consistently look at it and sort of just take the emotion out of it. And then two, if that's really not productive, I do take a little bit of a break to just sort of understand my perspective a little bit more. And sometimes that's way more productive for myself, of just taking a week off of it, as you would with any job, and then coming back, and then treating it like any other job too. Those have often been very helpful when I'm at least in those creative fatigues.
Y'all getting them jewels, man. Y'all listening to this? I agree. That's an option? That's a guy, yeah.
Okay. I'm Lena, and I'm in 10th grade, so I haven't really done anything like major. I don't even have like a camera to film with, but I've always loved like making a story and just dressing up and having fun with it. And I'll use like iMovie or something.
That's cool.
And I never really share it with anyone, like my mom maybe. And she always tries to get me to like put it on a platform like YouTube or maybe like TikTok. But I always, especially at my age, I'm always scared of like what people are gonna say, or like I overthink it too much. And once I like post something on Instagram, I'll overthink how I look, or like if people actually like it, or if people compliment me, I doubt it. So how do you deal with, if you do overthink, how do you deal with that?
I just move on to the next thing as fast as I can. You know, I just constantly doing more work. I mean, the whole YouTube thing and all that stuff was really disturbing to me, because when at the beginning part of my career, you would broadcast stuff and you really wouldn't get any feedback or reaction. You would just put it out. And then I remember when we were doing Last Chance High, just how horrible and the comments were about the kids that we had filmed. And that was my first experience with that. And I was not even expecting it. And it made me feel horrible as a filmmaker, because I had just put these kids, you know, these families and these kids who had trusted us, and put it out into the world, and then people are saying the most racist, cruel things, you know, about these people. So that was really hard. You know, so I don't envy your age right now in terms of just that sort of massive critical. It's just you know, it's terrible. So, but in terms of putting your work out there, you know, you could start by sharing it smaller, like a little bit more than just your mom. Share it with some other people that you trust. But you also just have to get to the point where you don't care. It's more about feeding that obsession of, you know, because if anybody's in this room, you're here because you have to create, right? Like, it's going to drive you crazy, and if you don't do it, it will drive you crazy. So I think just try to focus on the reason that you're doing it. It's not so much for, you know, for that. It's for yourself and putting it out and maybe making a difference through the films that you're doing. And
something that's helped me is that I just don't believe anything. So because if you believe the praises, then you have to believe the critical insults. So if you become addicted to what they're saying, what they're not saying, I set a task, like a goal, for every creative thing that I make, and if it hits that goal in some way, then I say it's successful. I just rely on my own judgment, or my team's judgment, like Craig was saying, our closest allies, your close allies, how they feel about it, how I feel about it, did it hit its target, and then other people can have their opinions. They can say, oh, this is the greatest film I've ever seen. Oh, this is garbage, should be in the toilet. You know, whatever they say, I don't believe it. Because I don't want to be dependent. I don't want to build a habit of being dependent on other people's opinions. You know, unless they're paying me. But if they're not paying me, you know. And I was wanted to say something. You said something earlier that you're saying, oh, I'm young, I haven't done anything. But you've been creating stories, so you have been doing something. So, you know, don't sell yourself short. Be all you guys as artists, it's really easy to talk a certain way to ourselves, but so critical to really be your biggest fan. Not in an arrogant way, but to, you know, really, you know, look at the things that you're doing. It might not be big yet, but you're young. You're just growing. You're having time to grow. So it's great that you're doing anything and that you're doing it consistently. So I would just say, you know, be kind to yourself. You know.
to that is, I mean, because at least in the photo world, I needed validation. I needed someone to say, "Oh, you're good," or "That's good," and you can get into that hamster wheel of, for example, Instagram. So you can be, I need more followers, I need more likes, and you can do that. I started that path, and at one point I realized, what's the point? Like, that's taking away time from my creative process of doing my projects. And look, there's people who are very successful, people that make, has 1 million of followers, and they make money out of that. I purposely make a conscious decision of like, I don't post as much as I should, or I should, I'm not so concerned about that. So, you have a choice to make, and like Craig said, and Jamal said, it's just, who do you want to hear? And I think I appreciate more these guys giving me feedback than someone that is gonna, say something nasty, and maybe he doesn't know the context of the work, or how I got to do that story, or actually taking the time to ask more questions. And so I had a couple of stories that I did, and I got some really hateful comments because I was photographing a group of rebels, and they thought I was giving them propaganda. And it just became this big controversy, and I said, you know what, I can engage, and I can be rage, and I can tweet, and all that stuff, or I can just leave the work speak for itself. And if you really want to engage me, then come and ask questions, and we'll have a conversation. So you have the choice. You have the control of what you want to do. So think about that. Do you want to get more likes and more followers, or do you want to embrace that that creative process? And I think for me, that's more important. So
I will also say it is always still nerve-wracking to put out your work in the world, especially after you've put so much time and effort into it, because you are kind of exposing a very kind of personal side of yourself. And I mean, I think that fear is sometimes healthy in the sense that, it's you really want to put your best foot out there. But kind of echoing what everyone else is saying, it has to be driven by yourself in the sense that your work should be first and foremost for yourself, because then you can defend it if you need to. Hopefully you don't ever have to, or you can just sort of disengage if people are critical of it. But it should always come from a personal place, so you can know where it's coming from.
Mark, can you talk about your first film, Davion, and how you went about that? Because it's something that always was impressive to me. Like talking about like, oh, at what point do I become an artist, or oh, if I can just get all this funding, I can make my first feature film. And Amon he just went and did it. Like, I don't think you even had any funding in the beginning. But if you could tell your story about Davion. Yeah,
so I made a fiction film in Little Rock in 2017, and it used a lot of elements of fiction, but I used non-professional actors, a lot of elements of documentary as well. And that was my first attempt of making a feature-length film. And it was really, really nerve-wracking and honestly terrifying because I didn't really know what I was doing. But basically, I set a date, an arbitrary date for myself, and it was basically a year in advance. I said, I'll shoot the movie then. Kind of similar to what we were talking about, just the discipline to, okay, what's our kind of runway to get there? And then I started to kind of pull together a team, though the team may have not had any film experience. I thought I could trust them. We have a similar language of love for movies. At least that can inspire us to find the sort of way through it. And then I had my own personal experience of like, okay, I've made some short films. Maybe this sort of experience translates into that. And then came the real barrier of funding, right? That is always going to be a barrier. And kind of saying earlier, I come from a working class family. I didn't really have inroads for anyone to finance my movie. And so I had sort of put 2 years of my savings into this thing. So I was my first sort of investor into my project. And then I just started a Kickstarter. That was really nerve-wracking because I had to put myself out there. I had to basically put my needs out there and ask for help, kind of. And I was really scared about it. But overwhelmingly, it was such a positive experience because beyond the dollar amount, it already created the curiosity of what are they making, you know, and how can I be involved? Immediately, so many people from Little Rock or even outside of Little Rock kind of had that shared interest. So beyond getting the dollar amount, it created much more resources than I ever anticipated. And the actual process, I'm very grateful for. It went really well. Though it was very tough, I think I was forced to start learning my own process, you know, because I told myself we're going to make this movie, and I had to start to kind of sketch out what that process was. It was very tough. It was very, very tough. But I think it's a rite of passage on whatever form of medium you're doing. You start to carve literally your own process. I think you have to sort of thrust yourself into that at some point. It's not just going to come it's not going to, no one's going to say, all right, it's your time. Here's that $1 million check. Let's get it going. And we got it going for you. At least not for me. And I can't relate to those who have had that. I know many people who've had that, but I think it's much more of a rewarding challenge because you learned the process yourself. So you're that much more empowered to do it again. Yeah.
I think this speaks to a couple of the questions. Our paths are all different, and I would embrace that you just embrace that path that that you have in front of you. Yes, we can complain, oh, I don't have the money, I don't have the deal, I didn't go to the right school, or I don't have the right camera, or what have you. But that's just walking that path is your own. And so I learned a lot from it. I mean, I came to this very late, almost in my late 30s. And so for me, it was, do I do this? Do I don't do this? And I know people that, younger generations who started being filmmakers right after high school or college. So you can sit down and complain and whine about why wasn't I chosen, why wasn't I the chosen one, but you all have a different path. So and explore it, like we've been saying up here. Just embrace it.
I'm going to show a clip of Davion just so we talked about it. Can I show that trailer?
Yeah.
Oh, Pat, I think it's requiring a password for the laptop. Do you guys know the password for the laptop? Or can somebody come type it in? I'm not sure whose laptop it is.
But
Okay.
just to kind of add to that, the feeling of being in over your head is quite a common feeling. As you were saying, the 10-part anxiety attack prior to the edit. But it's interesting because it's at that point where you really have to kind of sort of tell yourself what is going to be that new path. That's literally that crossroads when you start to have to literally carve your way out. And beyond it, in retrospect, you realize that was that sort of not the breaking point, but the sort of point where you really kind of had that breakthrough because you're forced up in it.
I mean, Jamal and I were talking about this the other day, that we will box ourselves in. We will say we're going to, like, for example, if I feel like I need to show HBO something by a certain date, it's like my fingers just type the email and send it, and then I'm like, oh crap, I just told them I'm going to show them these scenes in 2 months, and now I'm boxed in, and I have to go produce. I've got to step up and do it.
It's like Sun Tzu's Art of War, where it says put yourself on death ground, where you can't. There's no retreat. You put your back against a wall. You talk so much crap, like, yeah, I'm the man. This is going to be this and that. And he's like, oh, man, I got to deliver. You know what I mean? And you just put yourself, you just get it done. You figure out a way to get it done.
All right, so this is Amon's first
Let's go.
They changed it up.
I'm like, yes, you've been busy, man.
You should not have filmmakers up here
Yeah, doing this. Yeah.
Where do we go back to? Go back. There we go.
Right here. It's right here.
Get up, get up. Your brother got shot.
I see a lot of men today.
Get up, get up. Your brother got shot.
What you want to do? Just saying like a big brother.
You'll never do my big brother, you heard me?
Around with him for a little bit.
I see a lot of men you, Day. Trying to help you out.
Yo, Day, come here.
What's up?
See that?
Yeah. I got jumped in.
Got jumped into what?
I got jumped in the blood.
Welcome to the neighbor, man. You in this now? Ain't no turning back.
I'm like brother.
Yeah, we like brothers, like Braden Day, the sweet life of Braden Day.
Y'all like ain't even sweet. You struggle. Hey, you alright? Yeah.
My big brother just like yours. He got killed too. So I know how it is to see pain. I really like it, so I'm gonna keep me under my wing. Trying to teach you everything I know. I don't give a damn, you 13, whatever. You gotta be a man.
What you crazy? Bitch, you could've got yourself killed out there, dude. You lost your mind, D? Oh, you think that has something to do with your brother? Is that what you telling me? All these guns? This gang? Nothing to do with your brother.
Oh yeah.
That's just yeah, it's great.
And I think I think for me it was like two things that are the hardest, right? Is the first when you actually get started and say this is what I'm going to do. The second is when you have the first taste of success, and then you have to make your next film. Because I know for Brent, Brent and I were really, really lucky that we had a mentor like John Alpert who was giving us opportunities, at a pretty young age. But after we got Dope Sick Love was our first film that we did for HBO, and after that had success, then the pressure is even more, because then you really start feeling like a fraud and a failure, because you're like, okay, now I've had this little bit of success, and what do I do next, and can I get back to that point? I don't know if you guys had that same experience, but
You go.
Well, it's interesting because I've been in that area just very recently. So after Davion, it kind of exposed myself out to the larger film world, which honestly was never the expectation. It was kind of a dream, but never an expectation. So I certainly wasn't prepared for it. And then comes all that attention of, what are you going to do next? And you get thrust into these larger conversations of bigger movies. And I spent, let's say, 5 years entertaining that, and I just went and made a film that feels much more sort of like almost forging this path much more. And what I will say, having learned from the 5-year process after Davion, I will say it's more it's more abstract hearing it, but I really believe this. But you just stick to your guns. Just do the things that you enjoy. And it sounds easier said than done, but it will always be way more liberating, because kind of what Juan was saying, if you're interested in it, if that's what keeps you going, if you're obsessed with it, you're always going to be at your best, in my opinion. So it has less to do with who's looking at you, what are you going to do next, is it going to pop like this? That should never matter. And just kind of go back into it and do something that is fulfilling for you. And I learned that by the exact same situation as you're saying, as there's more eyes, you feel that pressure. It's a real pressure. But as best as you can, just shake it off and jump into something else right away.
You guys are all free to just keep firing questions at us as well, or we can just keep talking.
So, to preface my main question, have any of you ever worked specifically to like tell somebody else's story, like kind of a gun for hire, if you will?
Yeah.
Okay, so when doing that, because this documentary that I mentioned earlier that I'm considering working on, it's a very tragic story that happened to somebody, and it's something very serious and very personal to them.
Mm-hmm.
That if nobody else saw the film except them, I would want to make it as perfectly for that person, for her, as possible. How do I do that and not feel like I've ruined what could have been a really good and important story about, this terrible thing that happened in their life?
What would happen if you didn't make it?
Yeah.
Probably something worse.
Right, yeah.
The story would probably never be out there and be swept under the rug.
There you go. Yeah, I was just gonna tell you too as well. I work a lot for hire, for other projects. I've done stuff for Discovery ID, like some of the murder shows. I do sometimes stuff with people's personal stories and stuff like that. And I think, how close are you with this person?
Not very. I haven't actually met with her yet, but she is a close friend to one of my mom's coworkers.
I think one of the major steps is just hang out with her. Get to know her, get to really know her as a person, get to know her story. If you can meet other people that are connected to her story, just spend time. Because a major part of it is creating intimacy. You know what I mean? So that the trust is there, and so that you really have real understanding. If you're just trying to get an outcome without real understanding, a lot of times what I would do, and I learned this actually from Craig, because Craig is actually one of my mentors. He's actually one of my first mentors I ever had when I was 16. So one of the things watching him and Brent, a lot of things that they would do, and when I would be around them, is that they would sometimes some days, hey, we think we're going to shoot today, but we're not shooting. We just hang out. We just talk. We go, we eat together, eat with people, talk to them, get to understand them, put the time and really connect with that person. I mean, film is not just a craft, it's a relationship. So make sure you if you're going to tell somebody's story, have a relationship with them if you can. It's actually kind of a luxury if you have that possibility, because sometimes you don't have that possibility if you're working for an institution or a network. And then you have to just, I would say, research, read as much materials, try to get on a phone call with somebody, even if it's secondhand, and then try to put yourself in their shoes, empathize, use your empathy. But I really feel like if you go there with good intentions and you have a lot of intimacy with the person, it will kind of it works out.
Yeah, and I think you always just, it's just people can read sincerity, so if you're going to do documentary films, you have to be sincere, and you do have to take that responsibility, which you already are, just by you saying that very seriously, that somebody is trusting you with their real life, and then when that goes out there, that person's life is being exposed, sometimes to millions of people. So I've had some very difficult experiences where the film comes out And even though we did exactly what we said we were going to do, we didn't, deviate from that. The impact of the film had negative consequences on the people that we had filmed with, and that's really, really difficult. But those same people I'm still close with, I still talk to them all the time, and even when that happened, it's just owning that, and saying, that wasn't my intention, I'm really sorry, really sorry about that, working with them to see how you gain the trust back, even though you're not making a film about them anymore. That's always been extremely important to me, that those relationships, like endure past your documentary film.
Yeah, I learned that same thing from Craig and Brent. Yeah. They have such a great ability of just honestly making personal connections well beyond the project itself. And that often just really will that could change your path too, because you may have had the intention of telling this story, but just by getting to know this person, you feel compelled to tell it in this way or whatever. So kind of learning from them, it's less about the camera and the story and much more about who they are. Exactly. And then that a lot comes from that. Much more comes from that, in fact. Mm-hmm.
That's a great question, though. Another good question.
Hello. Thank you all for being here. It is very inspiring. I've been out of film for a few years, and so just being in here kind of reminds me of what these events do, inspire, and so thank you for doing that. I think a lot of these young folks are probably getting a lot out of it. Can you talk to us about working with your brother? And I have a brother, he's artistic. I always longed to be able to work with him, like on artistic projects, but we don't get along very well. So, and I see, your family's here, which I think is a good, for other young filmmakers to see, that a lot of times it's your family support, even if they don't have that filmmaking. But maybe about your relationship with your brother and you all working together and how that worked out.
Yeah, I mean, we, artistically, we were always on the same page. Personally, we fought a lot, that's just the truth. We fought a lot. But we complemented each other as filmmakers so well that it was just like, even if we would get in a big fight and need to step away from each other, it's just the work always is what, was the bond and unified us, And we're extremely different. I mean, if these guys have all worked with us, we're night and day different in terms of our personalities. And that really worked well for us, And I think that's where a lot of the conflict would come from, but it also, artistically, it's where it really worked, So yeah, it was not always easy.
Just to share working with them, if it's any help. So obviously, Craig is really warm and encouraging. He'll give you notes right away. Not to say that Brent isn't, but it's so hard to get a read on Brent because he's just so introspective and he's just so hard. And you'd always want to try to impress that person that much more, and you'd never get it. I mean, you'd get it in ways that feel really profound and fantastic, but it was just so different, and I saw how that yin and yang worked so perfectly.
They had a really good shorthand too. Like sometimes you guys would just know what to do with each other. It was kind of like almost like a super organism. So it was interesting. So
for me, it's been kind of like a new path of discovery because I worked more with Brent than with Craig. Craig was always like the puppet master, and I was always be in the field with Brent, and so I got to know him well in the field, and and what I'm saying is you wanted to impress him, but I think our friendship was born out of mutual respect, and I appreciate that because he always wanted my advice also and listened to what I had to say. He didn't have to follow it, but I think that's what I missed about him, but I also shared those times that I had with him because it was just inspiring but hardworking. I mean, he was very demanding. And I like that because I also hold myself to a really high standard. So I could see the other people around being like, oh my God, this is like, when is it going to end? Because we would just be hours and hours, and he had this thing. I think it's a motto that I really applied to myself: is we don't follow a schedule, we follow a story. And he said that one time, and I was like, yeah, that's who we are. Like that's how we work. So now I'm starting to work with Craig, and it's day and night, and it's good. But it's getting to know that person, and so I was lucky that I got those years with him. Yeah. And the ones I'm going to have with you. So yeah.
Yeah, and we were kind of like one entity. It's weird, And even though he's gone now, it's like he's not, because it's so ingrained in my head. Even when I'm editing, it's I'm trying to figure out, am I going crazy, or is he actually like a spirit talking to me, or is this just memory? Because he's always still when I'm working, like right in my head. And I might be going crazy too, but.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been making films for a while too, and I feel like I'm a bit at a crossroads, I guess. So I figure I might as well ask you guys your opinion. For a long time, I feel like my mantra's been kind of like do what's doable, and I guess now I feel like, well, if I do what's doable, what if I'm not really into it? What if it's not as interesting as it could be? But then if I do the other thing, which is an undoable thing, too much money, whatever, it might be a huge waste of time. So how do you balance, choosing the stories you're telling and those conflicting kind of, I guess, feelings and just, the logistics of it?
I mean, we always had multiple projects going at the same time. I feel like, so when we always had, in the beginning, we had John Alpert as our executive producer, and he would walk us into the meetings and say, I vouch for these guys and that kind of thing. And once we decided to just be on our own as a company and an entity, I remember that we made the biggest mistake right off the bat, because you only really get one opportunity to go get in front of people. And that gets easier as people know who you are, but so you can't walk into those situations with just one single idea and thing, because if there could be so many reasons why that idea is not going to work for them. Either they just did something that they feel is similar, they have something else in production that's similar. So we made that mistake of wasting, our first round of meetings, because people knew about Dope Sick Love and Off to War, but then, nothing materialized out of that first round of meetings, because the idea that we were pitching just wasn't right, So then after that, we learned we would start, developing 5 things at the same time. Some of those things would be further developed than the other things. Some of them would actually have footage to it. And then just the inertia of doing that, like the project that's meant to be starts being the one that takes off. And there's other projects like Last Chance High. We were pitching Last Chance High for 7 years to anybody that would listen to us. And they all say, oh, we've done the high school thing, or we've seen the high school thing. But, and then finally, we had a meeting with Vice where they were like, what's the thing you've been trying to do that nobody's done? And we're like, that school, and we maintained the relationships at that school for like 7 or 8 years, and then finally went back and were able to make it. But so yeah, for us it was multiple projects always.
I would just add, like, I would just ask you a question, like, are you trying to, the things that are doable, are they just doable within the same circle that you've been in? And the things that are undoable, because a lot of times it's kind of like things that are undoable become doable when the environment changes. If that makes sense.
In the same circle I've been in, yeah.
Yeah, so that's from listening to you. That's what I was assuming. I think something for me, like I used to raise a lot of money for shorts for a long time. And then I raised, like, there's this movie called Pierre the Pigeon Hawk with, like, all these celebrity people like Snoop Dogg and Jennifer Hudson, all this stuff like that. And I raised, like, $2 million for that. And I don't really have, like, a financial background like that. And what I found was that it takes the same amount of effort to raise that $2 million. as it did to raise like $50,000 for like a short or for one of these things. The only thing that had changed was that I was making the same amount of efforts, but in a different circle of people. And a lot of times as filmmakers, I think we kind of get into almost like tunnel vision, where we try to raise money within a circle of other filmmakers, which kind of makes no sense if you think about it. You know what I mean? It's kind of, you know, paradoxical. So a lot of times if you go into like other circles of other industries, like they have a much more romanticized view of what we do. Like they appreciate it in a different way, right? So some of the people that, the people who like invest the most that you should start building relationships with to help you do the undoable financially, is dentists. It sounds crazy. I know it sounds mad random and crazy, but you can look it up. Dentists are some of the most generous investors out of any other group, and they have a lot of money. Like some dentists make like maybe $500,000 a year, some $2 million, things like that. They have a lot of money. They do a nasty job every day because the mouth is the front door to the back door. They're all connected, right? So they always play. So when they have their downtime, they actually like to go and do things. They love the arts. They're very good patrons of the arts. Just start looking, think of lawyers, people in the financial things. Start making friends in those circles. Start expanding your circle just outside of the creative, and the same efforts that you've taken in those same circles will reap different rewards, basically. If that is helpful.
And I want to follow up with what Jamal said. I think for me, an advice would be just get out of that comfort zone, because I think that's what basically I felt if I stayed in chemistry, I knew what I was going to do every day. Like it was just the grind, get up at the same time, do the same thing. And I try to throw myself into not difficult situations, but certainly situations that I'm not comfortable with or I have no knowledge. And it's hard at the beginning to admit that you just don't know. So, you know, I started with photography, then I did a little bit of podcast, and then now film, now I'm trying to make a book, now I teach, and I feel like I'm stretching myself and growing. And some of those things are very, you know, nerve-wracking, because, you know, when you have to go in front of people and teach, now I have to think about what am I going to teach and how do I teach what I think I just know how to do naturally. So my advice is just, if you find yourself just doing the same thing over in the same space and maybe it's just not fulfilling, then maybe, you know, throw yourself into something maybe within the same area, but, you know, something that you just don't feel comfortable. And I think that's where you're going to grow, and maybe you're going to see other things that it will feed what you've been doing all this time. So it sounds a little cliche, but it works for me. And I always have this 5-year itch where every 5 years I say, okay, I need to do something different, or I need to move to a different place, or because if I feel comfortable, then I feel like I'm less creative, and I just kind of let that.
What's not possible in one environment is possible in another environment. So just keep stretching yourself to other environments.
Jamal, you want me to show your
Yeah, I mean, there's like this artistic film thing I just made. It'd be interesting to show to our audience. Y'all be like the first audience seeing it. We shot it in like, well, this is the trailer.
Do you want to do this first, or
it's up to you.
which do you
I mean, this is a film for somebody who wrote. It's like a teaser trailer for a film that we have coming up called Necessary. It was based off of these inner city books. That I don't know if you guys know who Donald Goines was, the writer. He's a writer of urban books. He was like the man. There's a guy named Kareem Hayes who's like the new Donald Goines, and so we did like this. You know, we're working in the NFT space because, like I was telling you, we're trying to stretch ourselves to do something unique. So we're releasing a feature in 3 parts in the NFT space as NFTs. So we can monetize it ourselves and go directly to the audience on a global scale. So it's a different way to finance films, right? Or to get paid. And yeah.
I still don't understand at all.
I'll explain it. I'll explain it, but yo, you make so much money, bro. Yeah. Like, it's just crazy. It makes no sense. And like it's like, but it does make sense. But I'll explain it. But that's another whole thing. But this film right here, this trailer, it's not maybe 100% graded yet on how it's gonna actually look, but we can show you it, and you tell me you think there is some language in the music, just so you guys know. But everybody, we're all big hair, right? Y'all all right. But yeah, take a look at it. Tell me what you think. All right, so that's one of the things, I don't let it go crazy. Intense. It's a little intense. Yeah, that's like a different way of I'm always trying to look for new ways to get money from this craft, because it is, you got to be creative. Like Craig was saying, you got to stretch yourself and Juan in a different way. So this is coming out in the NFT space. We already have there's people already with the tattoos on their bodies, and because the book has been big, and it actually seems grimy, but it's actually about how you can come back to the light once you're in the darkness, basically. And it's about like a person choosing not to do the whole revenge thing, but you think that's what it's going to be about, but it's like a okie doke. And a lot of people who were incarcerated have read these books, and it's changed them coming out. The other thing is more like it's a short based off of a poem. We were shooting a series. Sometimes you just have equipment lined over the weekend, right? You only had a 5-day shoot, but you have the full week rental, you know what I'm saying? So I was like, yo, let's do something. I have a poem, and I want to do something weird, and let's just try to do this poetry film thing. And I called up my crew people, and they was like, yo, some of them said yes, some of them said no. I had them for one day. We had the leftover gear, so I did this poetry film. It's really weird, but tell me what you guys think. That'll be the first audience to see it. No audience has ever seen it yet. So it's called Alone. Thank you. It's a little weird thing.
And you made that over the course of a weekend?
Yeah,
wow.
We had 24 hours.
Wow.
We did that. Yeah. Feel good movie of the year. Yeah, it's just about, why I was just curious. I want to do something about people who've lost their kids to violence or in other ways. A lot of times it ends up destroying marriages, and people don't stay together, and a lot of times that level of depression can cause suicide and stuff like that. We're probably going to put some sort of message at the end or some hotline or something like that for people. But yeah, I always just wonder what happens to the parents of people to couples after they lose a kid or something like that in that way. So that's what that was. Yeah. But I'm just saying, whatever resources you have, like the gentleman was saying, just do what you can with what you have. It might come out good. It might come out okay. So I think so.
First off, I love the color palette on your short. So I'm looking at you, Craig, but any of y'all, I would love your thoughts on this. You've been making films for a very long time. What kind of creative challenges continue to motivate you?
Yeah, it's a tough question because, I certainly get fatigued, because you get far enough along in this particular career path of what I know how to do, and I know I can keep replicating that. It's not hard for me anymore to get the meetings to pitch stuff, but a lack of a challenge does create a lot of fatigue. And so, yeah, sometimes to be quite honest, it's just I have a kid, I have a family, I need to make money. So sometimes that can be a project for me, but and then even if that's why I'm doing a project, I still need to find the challenge and the motivation to push myself to make it good. And again, a lot of that is just showing up. It's mostly just about showing up and getting started, and then I pretty easily get into the people and the story that I'm telling, and then again that responsibility that I feel like, okay, if I'm wasting people's or taking up their time to tell their story, that motivates me a lot, because I do think about that, the ending when it comes out and how they're going to react to it. Are they going to feel like I did their story justice? You know, so that's a lot of the challenge for me, and I just wrote my first pilot, like scripted pilot. So, you know, I have no idea if anything will happen with that, but yeah, so I like taking different sorts of challenges and seeing what happens. And sometimes it was just Brent. I mean, like, because he was just such a hard worker. You know, I would be kind of like Amon was saying, you know, it's like once we got married and, you know, it's your wife encouraging you to take a break because she can probably see that your mental health is needing it. But, you know, Brent is just like, he was a force. You know, he would just keep working. You know, his work ethic was so incredible. So a lot of times it was me being drug along by Brent because he just continuing to work. I don't know if that helped answer your question.
No, yeah, I mean, I was hearing my own voice, my own life reflected in your words. You know.
Right. Yeah, I'd love Juan to talk about photography.
Just a change of pace, I guess, would be good. But there's some duplicates here, so let me just take out. So my work, it's been, like I said, I started as a photographer, and I mean, I continue to do that. But and I've been focusing back in my country, so Colombia, South America. It's a country that's been going with, you know, an internal conflict for over 57 years now. And so I decided to influence heavily by the print media here in the States. I wanted to, you know, I didn't see stories from my country. I mean, they were published, but not as often. And so this is around 2010, 2009. Back then, the big story was a big migration of refugees from South Sudan into Chad. And the numbers, what I was interested in is, you know, they placed that as the big migration at that point. Right now, Syria, well, it could be actually Ukraine. But, and then Colombia was always second. And I was, yeah, I'm not seeing any images of that. So what I did was, while I was still working as a chemist, I took my vacations, and I would go and try to do a portfolio. That's how you basically get to, you know, show your work to editors. And to my surprise, I was hoping to find camps of UNHCR, you know, UN camps that we're so familiar to see in the news. And when I got there, that didn't happen. So I think this is when chemistry started to come in, because you have to become a problem solver when you're in the field. So what do I do now that there are these tents? How do I tell the story? And so this is Christmas Eve. The red hue that you're seeing in the kids' faces, they're watching Terminator 2. And this is at a high school where 400 families were placed. So what I did, you know, I got there, I introduced myself, and I said if I could sleep in one of those rooms, if they can just give me a mat. And everybody thought it was like, why? Why do you want to be here? And it's like, because I want to tell your story. So I lived with them for almost 2 months. And that's how I gain my trust. And that's usually how I work. So I really try to embed with the community. And at first it's just talking to them, having breakfast. People didn't want to see a camera. But after a while they said, okay, this guy's for real. Like, he is spending time with us. And, you know, and so at the end they just allowed me to hang out with them, and I got this great access. So so this is Christmas Eve, and this is all random stuff. This is also that school. In 2014, I came across this group of a front of the ELN. ELN is one of the rebel groups in Colombia. Stands for National Liberation Army, and it was a camp. It was a front made out basically of teenagers. So when I normally thought of child soldiers, I always placed them in Africa or somewhere in Asia, but I never thought of child soldiers on this side of the earth. So, and so this is them just posing, and I began to question again. It's all my projects are driven by questions like, what happens to them? How do they get to be that? Like, what choices do you have to make as a kid, or did somebody made those choices for you? And what happens after that? So I spend photographing this for almost 3 years. This is a site of, after a massacre, FARC, another rebel group, had killed 11 people in this indigenous community, and after 9 years, they were finally given their remains to be buried. So the community invited me. I knew them and spent time with them as well, and they invited me to photograph this with them. This is just some street photography. So this story is of Jose. Jose lives in this box. When I found him, he was living in this wooden box. So basically, he was living like in a coffin. And I mean, so that's one of the frustrations I have with photography, is I have to tell all this story, and I feel that's when documentary is so important, or writing. He came to this neighborhood, which is a rough neighborhood in the middle of Medellin. Medellin is the second largest city in Colombia. And he came, you know, he got into drugs, alcoholism, and his family just, you know, he left his family. And so the only thing he had from that past is this portrait. And I thought that just, you know, there's so much going on. Him, you know, the little red cloth that you have, that's what you clean the cars with, and you get some money. But he was living in this coffin in the time that I photographed him. A hotel where refugees come to live. And I was interested in thinking of ways of, if you had to pick up, if you were told that you have to leave right now and you have to move, what will you bring with you? And I don't know what I would bring, but I was photographing the rooms and making sure that, you know, what people carry with them. And this is Fatima, who's also her husband was killed by a rebel group, and she was living in this room, and she was very protective of her son, Jonathan, who had been kidnapped from that hotel 2 years before. And so, you know, you just find these stories, they're so, you know, so compelling, and I feel privileged that they let me spend time with them. But to make a photo like this was weeks of me just hanging out. And they finally forget that you're there, because you just become part of their daily routine. And then I went over to Venezuela. This is when Hugo Chavez died and Maduro took over. You know, and I got to see how the country was changing. And this was my first experience with, I was beaten by the police. I was going to take the cameras. They were going to take the cameras away from me. But it was, you know, covering a different conflict than mine. And you just learn things, you know. You learn where to stand, which ways to exit, which way to stand, where to go. And you know, these are people just blocking because they want to march and protest. They thought the elections were rigged. And this, I happened to go in between the protesters and the police, and that's when the police just grabbed me and they started beating me. Those are the protesters, and behind me are the police. So I got like really in between. I'm just kind of going fast through this. And this is, again, the child soldier stories. I would go and spend time with families. I wanted to know what they were doing, where they were living. This is a family who father and mother were commanders, and their kids were also in the rebel group. But once one of the kids got injured, he was shot, they decided to leave and quit the group and move to another city. And so, you know, they were living very poorly, if you would think of that, but they were trying also to be anonymous, because now they were considered enemies for the armed group as well, but also for the government. And then doing the story of child soldiers, I began to look for more, and I was able to spend time with the other armed group, and I lived with them for 3 months. So I got to do a lot of photographs of them in the camps in the jungle. But I could keep going on and on. I don't know if you have questions, because I have a lot of pictures, but this is some of the photography that I do, and I feel, you know, it's a medium that I love. I think it's the foundation for good documentary filmmaking, because you have to frame things right, thinks about the layers. For me, I try to use the space as much as I can. I try to tell stories with still images, but I think documentary sometimes does a better job. So I don't know. I'm not a purist like some photographers. Like this is the only way to do it.
But I've also noticed with you, you know, if you don't get it on the day that you had planned, you stay. Like that, there's been multiple times just in the recent weeks where, you know, it was overcast and you needed it not to be overcast, or you stayed behind for the New York Times thing in Colombia because you hadn't gotten what you felt like you needed in the time period.
Right. So so that is, and I think I got that also from Brent, working with him. Whereas like if we didn't get that good story, we just stay. And I came maybe 2 months ago. I was in Colombia doing a story for the New York Times Magazine that hasn't been published yet, but I called Craig one day and I said, I don't think I have this. I'm going to stay that weekend. That was the weekend I had to go to the morgue and all these things happen. And it's just that obsession of I think I can get a better photo. I think I can get better access. I just have to give myself more time. And I've been privileged to work for publications or mediums who give us budgets to do this. I mean, that's one side of the story, but when I did the Child Soldier story, that was all self-financed up until one point when I started to submit for awards, for grants, and then I got a little money here and there and finally got it published. So you do have to sometimes just believe in what you're doing, keep plowing through it, and then it will eventually it'll take form, and that way you can take it around. But yes, I become obsessed because I feel I need to. And the only reason I left those 3 months is because I ran out of hard drive space. Otherwise, I would have stayed there longer. But no one could have shipped me anything. I mean, so I just ran out of memories. Anyway, so that's sort of a taste of what I photograph and how I photograph things. But happy to answer any questions if you have any.
I mean, I have a question.
Yeah.
Specifically with the photo of the rebels and then the police, you had said you sort of wedged yourself in between. You know, how did you sort of build that sort of, I don't know, that ability to want to get there? You know, what was that something that you've naturally always been someone to just feel like, oh, okay, I can be in this place, or were there specific things?
There's a cliche from a very well-known war photographer, but I think it still stands true to this day, is that your photographs will only be better the closer you get. And sometimes you really have to get close to your subjects or to those situations. As a photographer, you just have to place yourself in the middle of the story. I think as a writer, you can sometimes like remove yourself a little bit from a distance and observe and then write. But if you're behind the camera, you just have to be in front of the action. And so, of course, I'm not encouraging people to be reckless and just show up in these areas without any training. You do need some training. And I took some trainings in terms of hostile environment and first aid. But even then, when we went to Ukraine, so this is photos I took while I was with Brent in Ukraine. And we were doing story of refugees, but you know, I'm always carrying my still camera and I'm always taking pictures. So this was at an opera house where it had been turned into a shelter for refugees. And even then, we didn't know what was going to happen. You know, as experienced as Brent was, and my experience covering other conflicts, you know, you kind of know how to read the temperature of the room, if that makes sense. But there's this chance that things can go haywire, and you can't account for that. So this is we're getting closer to Kiev. The Russians have been bombing. This is a housing for military families. Luckily, the family wasn't there. No one was killed in that, but they just bombed indiscriminately anywhere. It wasn't. You felt that this, and for me, this was a conflict that it felt not very organized. It was just random attacks, and that's that unpredictable aspect of it is that I think that a lot of us maybe didn't take into account. We should have, because this is what their operating mode in Syria was. But this is inside those wreckage. You know, you can read into photos. But for me, this was the last coffee that family had. I mean, I don't know what the cups were, the spoon there, sugar, the cereal, you have the brush. I mean, I try to think of like what was their thought before they had to flee. But it's a reoccurring theme in my photos with refugees because I experienced the same thing that I saw in Colombia or saw in Venezuela or I saw in other countries of refugees fleeing their country. Again, same. This is a high school that was waiting for refugees to arrive. And these were women who were working. I think for me and for Brent, it became very clear what the story was. It was the story about people trying to, help each other. As much as everyone was fleeing, but these women decided to stay and help. And they're making nets that cover these sandbags that from the air could be seen from the planes, because the sandbags are white. So they knit this and then they cover it with camouflage and then they cover these areas where the soldiers are. And this man's house just was bombed the night before, and the next day we showed up to the place. Anyway, so that's the latest. Yeah.
So, and I'm not even quite sure how to articulate this, but one of the things that we are talking about with the foundation, in addition to building this community of filmmakers for the purpose of helping them in their career, but mental health is something that I really want to be a part of this foundation, because I think, and it doesn't mean because you're going and covering these kind of extreme things like Juan and I have done. I think all artists, because of that obsession, because of things like putting your work out or people saying terrible things or just being that perfectionist, like nothing is ever perfect enough. I think artists really do struggle with mental health quite a bit. So it's something that we want to talk about freely and openly. I know we're going through it right now as well. So that will be another part of the foundation. So, it's a very difficult career that you're going into. And it can be extremely lonely career. So I think that's why you have to build these, community of people around you.
Absolutely. Time. We gotta wrap it up.
Okay. Any last questions? You guys, anything before we finish up?
Hi, I'm Fritzy. I'm not a student, but I might be someday. I'm looking to retire in a couple of years, and I keep thinking, I'm drawn to film, and because I enjoyed being a photographer a long time ago, back in the darkroom with a 35 millimeter, and I've worked with refugees from El Salvador and Guatemala and their political asylum applications, and more recently with veterans with service-connected disabilities. So, these stories, as you said, I'm so honored to hear these stories, and I would like to share that. But I don't have a camera. I don't know the first thing about it. I may have a romanticized view of what this is, and I'm not sure where to start.
I guess you can start by getting a camera so you can take the stills. And Juan can speak to photography more, but I've shot on so many different cameras over my career. There is no perfect camera. It's about the storytelling. What you're using to tell the story is the least important thing. Because there's brilliant films being made with iPhones, and that was happening even before they got to be such good quality. So, but yeah, I would say just start by getting the tool. Doesn't matter what the tool is. It could be your phone in the beginning. But you might have more specific photography advice.
I always try to tell people, don't worry about, you have to worry about the technical aspect, but you have something that we don't have, which is access. And if we would have to do a story on these Salvadorians or Guatemalan asylum seekers, we would have to go through the NGO and all that process. You already are in there, embedded, and they trust you. So to me, that's where the heart is, because that's the starting point. And as you do more of this, then you get paid to be dropped into an area like Ukraine, and you have to find a story, regardless of what's happening. But you have something that that we don't have if we were going to film or photograph that. So I think it's starting maybe with your phone, taking portraits, sharing with them. But that's how I did it. I would go and show them the physical photo of that, and that's a way of bonding, and it's a way of trust, and it's a way of them knowing what you're trying to do with it, with photography. But you always have to also have clear what is it that you want to do with this work. Is it just to share with the community? Is it maybe to do like an annual report for where you work? So you can find ways of making that work useful to be seen out there. So, but you have something that we have to work to get, which is access. So, and then the technical part will come as you do it more and more often. There's that 10,000 hour rule, or I don't know. I feel like I still learned. I'm always learning. Light changes. I always try to photograph in different situations, and but that will come with part of just repeating and doing it.
And that's why absolutely hate when new cameras come out, or I have to get rid of my camera, because at a certain point it is like an extension of your arm, and then you have to switch, and you've got to relearn how to where the button's at and all this stuff. So I usually try to hang on to a camera as long as I possibly can.
Yeah, I think what I'm trying to say is learn the storytelling part of it. There's all the whistles and bells and stuff. Yeah, you can buy $1 million camera, but I've seen work done with very simple equipment too. So don't get hung up on the technical side of things. It's something you should know how to do, but storytelling is, I think, the most important thing. At least for me. I don't know how you guys feel about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Can you briefly describe your style of filmmaking?
Me?
Yes.
Cinema verite, which, if people aren't familiar with that term, verite basically means the truth, right? And so but we try to be as invisible as we possibly can as filmmakers. If you ever hear our voice, it's because we couldn't manage to edit it out to, if somebody said something really great, but it wouldn't stand on its own without the question making sense of it, our voice wouldn't be in it otherwise. Like, just really as observational as we possibly can be is our style. Yeah, but yeah, term-wise, people would call it cinema verite, which I feel like is really disappearing in the industry. There's not many cinema verite filmmakers left.
Hello. Hello. So our event is coming to an end, but I had a question for you all as well. We have so many filmmakers in this room, emerging filmmakers. Are there any resources or bits of advice that you would want to give to any of us in this room, just based on your own experiences, or resources that you used as emerging filmmakers as well?
I'll just be brief. For me, people have been the best resource, and people outside of just your own community. People just outside your own race or your own zip code. I would say try to be an explorer, be a bridge and be an explorer, and it opens up the possibility of a lot of opportunities that you wouldn't expect. Than being stagnant or situated in just a small bubble, although there are some benefits to that. It's just good to always be constantly making new relationships as well. That's been very helpful for me. And also learning, like Juan saying about the technical side is important as well, but also learning the business side as well. Like, you want to be an artist and stuff like that, but you want to not only learn the business, but have friends who are also embedded in the business side of this, because it is a business. So that's it. But, yeah.
You know, the Little Rock Film Festival for me was a pretty kind of pivotal space of community, and it was so much about the people who were working there as much as it was the people who were attending. So, you know, an event like this, even just looking around, you may kind of bump into a future collaborator because you all made yourself available, you all have the similar interests, and you kind of start to self-select pretty quickly, you know? And so we sometimes believe that there's not a big community, but it's kind of cool events like that start to kind of are the formations of it, and then you have to take that next step to kind of see what that truly is. So I wouldn't be shy with getting to know your potential collaborators wherever it is.
Yeah, and you know, mentoring and mentorship is hugely important in this career, and so I would say that there's so many of those places, you know, and it could be your favorite documentary filmmaker or favorite feature film that you might be surprised if you reach out to them that they actually might bring you onto their team. You know, I know you did that in the scripted world. You know, Brent and I did that, or Brent found DCTV first because he saw one of John Alpert's films. He was studying you know, at the School of Sociology at Columbia University for a grad program, saw John's film, got so inspired and went down the next day to try to intern. And then I followed after that. So there's a lot of places where you know, can intern or go to film festivals, you know, and just embed your place in those places where those opportunities will arise. And then, you know, don't be shy about being persistent. Like Emily was so persistent with me, Aman was so persistent, you know, so just, you know, stay at it until you get to where you're trying to go. And did we do a sign-in sheet when we came in? Did people put their contact information? So okay. So we'll get in touch with everybody.
Thank you.
Nothing.
Final words,
Okay.
but we have 4 giveaways, so you guys pick one each.
Oh, okay.
Drum roll.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
I got a big old hand. Okay, we giving this away? Okay, cool.
You want to read your name?
Caitlin Miller.
Ooh, come on down.
What are you giving away?
Giving stuff away.
Yeah. Did they give you something to give us?
All right, we'll give you a choice since you're first up. Would you rather have a hat or a signed poster?
Poster.
Okay.
Yeah.
See if I can get this off.
I just want to say it right.
All right, so we have Warrior Champions, which is one of our films, or Off to War. All right, that's a cool poster. And the photographer who took this, Brent Sturton, is I would say the best photographer in the world, wouldn't you say? I mean, he's won the World Press Award 13 times, I think, something like that. But he took this photo. It was really great. So this was a film we did. Melissa Stockwell, I think she was the first female to lose a limb in active combat, and then we followed her. She decided she wanted to be a Paralympic swimmer after she lost her leg. Tried out for the team, made it. They said there's no way you'll ever go to the Olympics, and she made it. Like she went to the Paralympic Games, and we followed her and a couple of other veterans. So,
That's awesome.
yeah.
Do you want to sign it?
Yeah, I'll sign it. We can do
sign
that
it
when we
later,
come
yeah.
down. Yeah. All right. What's next?
You ain't gonna give her a clap. There you go, winner. Yeah. Let's go.
Which name do you have?
Justin Crum.
Justin, come on down.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what I wanted.
Wanted the hat?
What was the other option?
Poster.
I'm good.
Oh. Did you have a name? Oh, you
No,
read
I
your
already
name
did.
already.
Okay. Corrigan Revels or Revels? All right, brother. What you want?
Hat or poster?
Hat or poster.
All right.
There you go.
Appreciate it.
All right, man.
All right, and then Kyle Pitts, you're stuck with a poster. That's all it's worth.
Oh, good.
So if you're not familiar, this is the 10-part series we did in Iraq called Off to War. We embedded with the Arkansas National Guard for a year straight in Iraq, and then Brent and I would split up, and we would follow. One of us would be with the families, and the other one in Iraq, and then we would switch places. So we did that for a year in combat in Iraq, and then did a 10-part series for Discovery called Off to War. But we'll sign this over here.
Let that inspire you.
Cool. We'll sign them over there. All right. Thank you, everybody, so much.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Is this on? Yes. Thanks, everybody, for coming. We're hoping to do more of these filmmaker events in the future, combining efforts of the Brent Renaud Foundation and Arkansas PBS. So look for that in the future. And if anybody's interested in interning at Arkansas PBS, please see this gentleman right over here, Levi Agee. And thank you all for coming. Thank you, Juan, Craig. Thank you. Oh yes, please take the wicked with you.